You all set?
Yeah, she wanted me to let you know.
Surviving in style or barely?
You always look so nice.
Probably more on there.
I work from home, so I have to like get dressed and come here.
February 1st today? February 1st. I'd like to call the District Budget Committee meeting to order for February 1st. Can we all rise for the Pledge of Allegiance? Just a little housekeeping here. Carol, are you with us?
Yes, I am.
Can you tell us where you are and if you are alone?
Satellite Beach, Florida, and as far as this room, I'm the only one in here.
Thank you very much. Well, it's been my practice to entertain public participation at the beginning as well as the end of every meeting. Are there any folks from the public that want to come forward and give us your reflections, ask your questions, make your comments? Seeing none, we will move on. I'd ask for a motion to approve the minutes of the 20th and the 25th of January.
Motion to approve?
Like to have them separately. How about the 20th? Have a motion? Second? Any amendments, reflections, corrections, deletions, etc.? Seeing none, all those in favor signify so by saying aye. Aye.
Chuck, you need a roll call.
You know, thank you, Carol, for reminding me. I was talking to Pat earlier today, and we were discussing the need when not we needed a roll call. And I said to Pat, Pat, let's just do a roll call on everything, and that way we won't have to worry about it. And what was my first mistake? Of course, not having a roll call. Thank you for bringing that to my attention. So
No problem.
So we will have a roll call vote. Pat, would you call the roll, please?
Dan?
Yes.
Chuck?
Yes.
Brian?
Yes.
Lori?
Yes.
Scott? Shane, excuse me.
Yes.
Carol?
Yes.
Ellen?
Yes. Oh. Yes.
Thank you. Mackenzie?
Yes.
Naomi?
Yes.
Gina?
Yes.
Lee?
Yes.
That's unanimous.
Gillian?
Did Gillian come in that I didn't see? Ah! You told me you were going to be late. All right, yes, you were. Gillian?
For both weeks, yes, and abstain. First week.
First week. We're doing them one at a time because there's a correction. Yes. Thank you. And I think that's everybody. Did I miss?
All right, so we have a majority vote to approve. Can I have a motion for the meetings of the 25th?
I motion to approve.
Second?
Second.
Anyone wish to make changes? Naomi?
A small change under the maintenance report, it states that I was concerned that it is too low in its funding. I was concerned that level funding won't meet the needs in a rising cost environment.
Okay.
Are there any other corrections or amendments? Seeing none, Pat, would you please call the roll?
Lee,
Yes.
Chuck,
Yes.
Naomi,
Yes.
Lori,
Yes.
Ellen,
Abstain.
Shane,
Yes.
Gina. Gillian,
Abstain.
Carol,
Yes.
Dan,
Yes.
Mackenzie,
Yes.
Brian.
Abstain.
Okay, so that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. That's 10, 3 abstentions. It should be 9. Nine, 0, 3.
And meeting minutes are approved by a majority. In deference to Carol, who has some difficulty hearing, I can appreciate her position. We all have masks on, and we're often somewhat distant from the microphone. So if, when we are on the microphone this evening, if we could please speak directly into the microphone so as to get a clear communication. Carol would appreciate it, as well as I'm sure all the rest of us. Next on the agenda this evening is our superintendency. Welcome. And we're going to have an explanation of the meeting procedure and warrant article review. I guess would be our Superintendent of Finance, Matt Chevenel.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mower. I appreciate that. Thanks for the promotion, because I'm really the assistant superintendent. But I will take that title and the glory that comes with it without any of the headaches.
Old habits die hard,
I know,
Matt.
I know. So, anyway, the Budget Committee has to vote on all moneyed warrant articles. The articles that are not moneyed, meaning having an appropriation, the Budget Committee does not vote on. So, because there's a couple of big tickets in here, I'll go through. We're looking at the deliberative session being in March 8th. That's the first part. This is the preamble of the warrant. And then Article 2 is basically, I might as well explain these things, to authorize the school board to accept gifts of real property. The Merrimack School District does not have the authority on its own to, without this warrant article, to accept gifts of real property, such as land and other non-cash donations. So we have to authorize the board to accept those donations every single year. So we've had this on the warrant article every single year for, I don't know, count the decades. And one of the last times this was utilized was when we accepted 13 acres going down Woodbury Street almost to Buckley's. That was called the Ronka property, W-R-O-N-K-A. And we accepted an acre of land at the end of the high school parking lot that was donated to us by the town of Merrimack. So those are two examples. If we didn't have this warrant article in there, we would have to go to a public hearing. We would have to have a deliberative session. We would have to go in front of the budget committee. We would have to go in a paper ballot vote, everything like that. So it streamlines the process. So when any board member, when we get a gift of real property, you know, the board's going to discuss it before accepting it, looking at the downsides, the upsides. Are there any, you know, hidden things that come with the property that we don't know about? So the board will do its due diligence before accepting anything like they did with the 2 parcels of land that I just spoke of. So that's not for you to vote on, but it's for your information so you understand the warrant. The next article is the teacher's contract. That's actually broken up into 2 different warrant articles. The first warrant article, Article 3, and this is a 1-year contract only. In the past, we have done 3-year contracts. That's been the history of us. I think 1 year we did a 4-year contract with 2 years on the money, so we had to come back after year 2 and put the next following 2 years as far as the money goes. That was a kind of creative way of doing it, and it wasn't bad, and it passed. This article here is for $1,247,930, and it's for the Merrimack Teachers Association. We went through a series of negotiations with them. Shannon Barnes, Jenna Hardy, myself, Bill, Melissa Fazlick, our HR director, and Laurie Rothaus. Yes, I'm sorry, no, it was Laurie and Shannon, I'm sorry. So I misspoke on Jenna Hardy. I gave her credit for something she didn't do, but that's okay. So we went through negotiations with the MTA. It was very thoughtful, very candid negotiation, and the amount you're looking at represents everything fully loaded. By that I mean New Hampshire retirement, FICA, workers' comp, all the benefits associated with it, and it represents a 3.75% increase for 1 year. Now, if you just bear with me, the next article is Article 4. So if Article 3 fails, Article 4 allows us to hold a special meeting to address the cost items in Article 3. So what would happen if this article failed, the board would have the option to go back and renegotiate, come up with a different cost item, present that in public, present it to the budget committee, go through a deliberative session, a public hearing, and another ballot vote. It would be the same process we're going through right now. It would just give us an option. Then you go to Article 5. Article 5 addresses the teacher contract again. What it does is, shall the district approve the cost items included in the collective bargaining agreement, et cetera, et cetera. And this is basically for a market adjustment to be added to the base salary beginning in 22-23 to position the Merrimack Teachers Association at competitive rates in regards to surrounding districts in the amount of $950,000. Now that's probably around a little bit less than a 3%, maybe like a 2.75 across the board. So the 950 would be the top end, but it said some not to exceed 25% of what the surplus is. So if there's $1 million surplus, that 25% of that would be $250,000 that we'd have to fund this. So you would need to get more than that, and we're expecting to have the amount of surplus to give us the ability to fund this fully, given our past history over the years. And so these articles really kind of go together. And when looking at the comparative districts that we did look at, we looked at people who our people are leaving us for. Amherst, Bedford, Bow, Brookline, Concord, Derry, Hollis, Londonderry, Nashua, Salem, and Wyndham. So when you look at us compared to those districts as an area average, and you look at our current salary scale, if you're looking at like a master's with 5 years experience, if you go to one of these districts, you're making $7,000 more a year, period. If you get up into, let's say, the master's plus maybe 10, where you have 10 years of experience in the district, you know, you're hitting your stride, you've been a good teacher, we want to keep you. If you go to one of these other districts, you're looking at anywhere from a master's on up, even a bachelor's degree, bachelor's plus 30, $10,000 to little over $12,000 more you'll be making working for one of these other districts. And when you take that amount of money and you put it over a span of, let's say, a 20-year career, you can actually make around $150,000 to $160,000 more over your career working in one of our competitors. And they are our competitors. So the first warrant article, which is this 3.75% increase, remember I said around 7,000 to around 12, almost 13? That brings us down to like maybe 6,000 to around $11,000 difference. It doesn't make that big of a dent in the disparity between our salary scale and those of competing districts. When you add in the Article 5, which is the $950,000, that kind of, what we're doing is we're bumping up the starting salaries to attract teachers coming out of college. You know, masters with 1 year, masters with no years, you know, whatever we have to do, bachelor's plus 15, plus 30, with like 0 years experience, bring them in, put them on a plan, get them going, you know, so that kind of takes care of the lower end of the competition cycle. But once you get beyond year 3, year 4, you're still behind. Let's say I go to back to my master's 5, $2,900, and on the upper end, instead of being $10,000 or $11,000 behind, for those who have been here for a while, you're still behind around $7,000. So even though you're infusing this money into the salary chart in order to remain competitive, you still are behind, and this is in relationship to the 21-22 contract and doesn't take into account any contracts that these districts are going to pass next year if they're up for renegotiation. So it really was a concerted effort to try and solve a problem that basically manifested itself by us being good negotiators. Maybe we were a little bit too good at negotiating contracts. But right now, with the teacher shortage, with everything that we see around us, with people not wanting to get into the profession, if we can't even come close to being competitive with other districts, And if we can't pass these two warrant articles in tandem to one another, you know, the future, there's a lot of people who love Merrimack, they're going to stay here. You know, they're going to stay here regardless because they enjoy it, they love the atmosphere, they love the support system, they love the professional development, they love the camaraderie, they love the mentorship, everything like that. But there are some that will look at this and look at another scale and say, okay, I got my training in Merrimack, I came in, and now it's time for me to jump. And they're going to jump to one of these other districts. We want to stop that kind of from happening. So these articles, Article 3, the trailer Article 4, and Article 5 are really kind of one unit to try and get us from where we are at to where we need to be, and you can't do it in 1 year. And the thought process was that in today's economy, with the way things are, that a 1-year contract would be more acceptable to the voters than try and go for a 3-year contract. So next year, we'll be going back to the bargaining table. Hopefully, these two warrant articles will pass, and we'll see if we could put together, I don't want to speak for anybody else, just my thought process, a multi-year agreement to help get us up to parity with other districts, depending upon what their contracts do. So I know I've been talking to Bill about this for a while. He's had similar experiences, so I'm going to, at this point, turn the microphone on to my wise sage to my left.
Well, thank you, Matt. I have had experience with this type of labor issue. Spent 16 years as a superintendent in one of the top school systems in Massachusetts. We always had a group of residents who felt that Westwood was a wonderful town, wonderful school system, and staff would stay. However, we fell behind competitively with our wages, both wages and our fringe benefits, particularly health insurance contribution on the part of the municipality. School systems for a number of years, committees, would say, well, we understand the issue, but we really can't do anything about it. That came to an end when we lost 11 absolutely outstanding teachers in 1 year, one single year. I kept talking with the union saying, just be patient, please be patient. We'll see if we can turn things around. But when those 11 teachers left, the school committee took notice, the finance committee, the select board took notice, and the residents took notice. What I mentioned to the community at that time was the younger staff tend to be much more mobile. You know, a former labor secretary who served for many years in Washington said about 15 years ago that the younger labor force tends to go from one good contract to the next best contract with more ease and rapidity than, let's say, the baby boom generation has. We would come into a job hoping to stay for life, get our watch or whatever it was at the end of 35 or 40 years, and move into retirement. What we need to be able to do is attract outstanding teachers. If you look at the research in terms of what are the variables that make a difference in the lives of children, in terms of their development, first and foremost is the quality of the classroom teacher. We want to be able to hire the best, but not only be able to recruit and hire them, but retain them. As Matt said, you know, they'll come here as a training ground, and if our salaries are not competitive, they will leave. Our staff left to go to Bedford, to Lexington, to Concord, to Carlisle, to Acton, because in a very similar manner, those school systems were paying $6,000 or $7,000 more per step on the salary scale. I had the superintendent of schools from Acton Boxborough school system, come to me about 10 years ago and say, Bill, my school committee asked me to come over here to find out how you are getting the results in Westford in terms of the ranking of the school system, the quality of the students that you're producing, at a per pupil cost that's about $6,000 or $7,000 less than ours. And I said, Steve, it's very easy. It's all in the salaries. Our staff can leave here go to your school system and make $6,000 to $8,000 more on the same step level. It was just a matter of they were paying more competitive wages. They weren't necessarily getting the same results as us, but they were paying more and attracting our staff. So 11 teachers we lost. And sometimes people have a propensity to not believe statements like that. I think the worst thing that we could do is engage in emotional hyperbole in terms of, well, the sky is going to fall. The school system is going to be ruined. Well, if we continue to lose great staff, the school system is going to be ruined. Okay? Because we can not only afford to not have good teachers leave, we can't afford to not be able to fund outstanding young educators who know the newest methodologies, the newest pedagogy, are experts at technology because they've started from the time they were crawling and using technology. And so I've seen it happen. And to remain competitive in terms of salaries and benefits is one of the most important things we can do for any employee, whether it's a school system or whether it's any of the town employees also. We have to be competitive.
Thank you. That's all I have to say as far as the presentation of I hope you don't mind me blending these together to kind of give you a vision of what we want to do. But if there are any, I don't know if you want me to go through the rest of the warrant article, or you want to do questions as we go, or it's up to you, Mr. Moore.
Why don't we do some questions as we go?
Okay.
All right?
It is the pleasure of the
Chuck, I
board.
have a question.
Yes, Carol.
I'm wondering if Matt could give us a little insight into kind of the derivation of that $950,000 amount. I certainly agree. I think that we need to make sure we're compensating our teachers, relative to surrounding communities, that we're competitive. I'm a little puzzled because I'm looking at that $950,000 amount compared to the one-year contract of roughly $1.2 million. And I'm saying that's approximately a 75% increase. So I'm sitting here scratching my head.
Net changes.
75% increase?
I think she's comparing the net changes under Article 3 to the amount in Article 5. And
Okay.
assuming,
I'm taking the $950,000 in Article 5, and I'm comparing it to the one-year contract of $1.2 million in Article 3, and I'm saying that $950,000 is an additional 75%, roughly, above what's being proposed in Article 3. So that's where I'm confused.
Yeah, but it's not a 75% increase. It's an incremental increase of probably without the retirement and everything like that, around $750,000. So what it is you take the 1.2, you add it to the 950, and that's the total amount of cash we want to infuse into the salary chart, taking into account benefits and whatnot. So instead of going for one warrant article that's $2.1 million, the board chose to split it into two, one which is a 3.75% for the 1.2 million, and another one that's to do what we called a market adjustment that represents around a 3% increase. It's lesser than the 1.2. And so
That's where I'm not understanding your math, and I'm sure I'm just misunderstanding, but I guess I just need it explained better, because $950,000 is, give or take, 75% higher than the $1.2 million.
Carol,
Yes.
let's see if Naomi can perhaps shed some light on this for you.
Okay.
can you hear me clearly? Can you hear me?
There's a little echo, but as long as you don't talk too fast, I should be okay.
The sum in Article 3 is not the full sum of the teacher's contract. It is the change.
Which number are you saying is the change?
The 1,247,930.
All right. You just clarified it. Great. I'm good now. Thank
Okay,
you.
Thank you.
Naomi, thank you very much.
Are there, Shane, yes.
It seems like after we do these two things, we're going to be pretty far behind still. Is there a plan to continue to increase these?
Yes, at our next negotiation session, if this one-year contract passes and both warrant articles pass, the board will go back to the negotiation table with the MTA, do another comparative analysis, see where we wound up. Maybe some other districts who are out there for a contract, maybe their contract failed, maybe we're a little bit closer, who knows? But we're going to collect new information and look at it again and try and put together perhaps a multi-year contract for the next time for 24 and 25 throughout, in hopes that our economy will be looking a little bit better than it is right now, in hopes that people will be willing to support the teachers of Merrimack in this fashion, because we're all cognizant of, taxes, the tax burden, etc. I hear from the town that there's another $100 million worth of assessed valuation coming in on the books. Maybe that'll help. I'm not sure. I don't get into, I used to, but I don't get into municipal tax rate setting. So maybe it's going to be a different scenario and a different tone and tenor that will be putting these warrant articles forward another year in the future. And the MTA and the board agreed that this is not the time to ask for a 3-year contract. It was just, let's ask for a 1-year contract, see if we can get some traction, and then let's continue to build upon that.
Anyone else?
So I don't know if this is more to Matt or to Lori, but I just wanted to know if I'm understanding this correctly. It seems to me that by splitting it into two, you're doing two things. The first is that you're doing a certain amount of protecting the core contract from being affected by people who aren't thrilled potentially by the additional wages. And the second is that you're tapping potentially into surplus. Is that an accurate?
Yes, that's correct. Yeah, the $950,000 is coming from surplus. So if the surplus isn't there, this doesn't get funded. And the MTA understands the rules of engagement on that.
Ellen?
Mine's more of a comment for anyone who might be listening in the public and then everyone in this room. There happens to be a phenomenal article that was published on January 8th in Forbes.com regarding why education is about to reach a crisis of epic proportions, and taking care of your teachers is extremely highlighted and well planned out in that article and presented. It was written by Mark Pera, who's an author and CEO for a strategic consulting company. So it has a lot of fundamental, financial, emotional in it. I'm a mother, I'm a business owner, I'm a homeowner, I'm a commercial property owner in town. I get the tax burden, believe me, but there is no burden greater than not providing a proper education to our future generations. So you should do your research, and it's not just because the teachers want more money, they deserve it, and our world is going that way, from healthcare to McDonald's to Dunkin' Donuts to our teachers. They need to be supported so that they can support our future generations. So check out that article. That's all I wanted to add in there because it is very good.
Brian?
The changes, are they evenly spread across the pay scale, or are they concentrated at one end or the other?
The first thing we wanted to do was to bring up the first 2 or 3 steps. So there's more money thrown in that area. But, you know, with that, you have to kind of ripple it out to keep the incremental increases between the steps somewhat the same. So a lot of the money is going to the first 3 or 4 steps of the chart in order to get new teachers into the system. And then once we get them in the system, you know, there's still a greater disparity as they go up, but over the next, if these 2 pass, that's going to lessen. But there's more of a percentage increase going into the lower steps, be it bachelor's to PhD, for new teachers coming into the system.
Okay. And is our turnover for teachers higher than the neighboring districts right now? Do you have that information?
Brian, I don't have that specific information. I will say, though, just from many years of dealing with negotiations and contract issues, it will tend to be higher, certainly in a community like this that is an excellent school system, but the compensation is so far different and less, so far less than the other area schools that we tend to lose more.
So
Most
if not compared to area schools, compared to kind of industry average, where do we stand in terms of turnover? Are we high, low, about where you would expect?
You know, I don't have any national figures. Yes, there has been a turnover precipitated by COVID. Actually, I can't tell you where everyone's going. You know, we're losing staff members here. Businesses are losing staff members, and everyone's having trouble attracting them. But I don't think that this will continue over a long period of time, but I will say in Merrimack, it will continue because of the lack of competitiveness of the salaries. And, you know, I will add, Brian, if I could, when I mentioned my former district and the disparity in pay and the ultimate correction, when the community realized the magnitude of differential between the salaries in our district and other districts in the Merrimack Valley, they passed an override, which was absolutely unheard of and unprecedented. The community of Westwood passed an override just for teacher salaries because they were so concerned about the loss of our staff because of the lack of competitiveness. And that's what I'm concerned about here.
If it were feasible to get some comparative numbers on what the actual turnover rate is for Merrimack versus neighboring districts, state, national, anything like that, just so that we have some quantification of if we are already seeing a problem, we can actually put hard data behind what is the problem that we're seeing.
We'll be glad to obtain whatever we can. And the importance of something that you just said in terms of the quantitative analysis is in any time you're talking about employee salaries and benefits, there are 2 ends of the discussion spectrum. There's the empirical and the emotional. And I always feel we have to stay at the empirical end to make sure that we're dealing with facts and figures and not emotion. So we'll be glad to get you whatever we can.
And then one other question, in terms of when I asked about how it's distributed, in the past, there's been a lot of talk, year after year, I've heard how the salary came in below the budget number because of retirements and more senior teachers being replaced by more junior teachers, and that results in a lower salary. So 2-part question. First, is that still a part of what we're experiencing, or are we kind of at where we've lost as much of the senior talent as we can? And then the second part, in the private sector, there is high turnover costs more than taking care of people because there's a cost to recruiting. How does that translate in education with that trade-off of being a unionized workforce and the higher, more senior employees getting higher salaries? Does that cancel out the cost of recruiting new employees, or do you still have that higher burden of having to recruit new employees?
Well, I can, go ahead. You reach first.
I can't say there's an extraordinary cost associated with recruiting new staff. What we do is we do outreach to the colleges and universities, let them know of the vacancies that we have, the potential openings. We also post the job openings on the various websites, whether it's School Spring or Indeed. And so we don't have an extraordinary cost associated with recruiting. When we needed to place written ads and print ads in the newspaper, those were extraordinarily expensive. But now, with the electronic media, the cost of recruiting has come down significantly. In terms of the distribution of the staff, over the last 8-9 years or so, I can't say it's a complete bimodal distribution, but as you know, the baby boomers and other generational workers have progressed towards retirement. So we tend to have a large population at the top of the salary scale. That's not atypical to school systems, and a somewhat larger population at the lower and mid levels. So there is a savings, as you indicated, in terms of the higher cost salary employees leaving and the lower cost salary employees coming in. And Matt could be more specific on that, certainly.
Yeah, roughly in a normal year, we would see a differentiation in the cost of those coming in versus those leaving of probably around to the $300,000 range. Now, granted, our salary budget just for teachers is around $22 million. So it's around $300,000, $350,000 in a normal year. Last year wasn't a normal year because I think we started out probably 20 teachers short, the year prior to that, which was a contributing factor to the $8.1 million surplus that we had to give back to the town to reduce the school portion of the tax rate. So normal year, it's around 350. Bill said as far as the ads go and advertising and whatnot, it's gotten a little bit expensive. But we do have, even if you hire a teacher that has like 5-6 years experience and they come in, you're coming into a new school district. Maybe you used Aspen as your student information system. Now you have to learn how to use PowerSchool. Maybe you use Schoology as your data parent interface, and now you have to learn how to use Canvas. So there's a big mentorship program that we have here that every new teacher, if they're brand new or they have been 5 years, 6 years experience, if they're new to the district, they get assigned a mentor. That's right, Kim? Yep. See, she nodded her head. I heard that. So, there's a big train-up cost, regardless of where you are in the scale, to learn our system, learn our curriculum, which Kim is working very hard on right now, and to learn the way we do things here. So that is a steep learning curve, but we have the supports in place to make that palatable. And anecdotally, I don't have hard evidence on it, but I have heard our mentoring program is one of the pluses of why people have mentioned that they've enjoyed their experience here and have stayed on for a period of time, because we made it a kind of soft entry into, the sometimes, the always hectic, job of teaching, be it elementary school, kindergarten, middle school, high school. When you walk into a new building and you don't know anybody, and you don't even know how to log on to your computer, and you have no idea how to use PowerSchool, the grade book, the portal, everything like that, there's a lot of ramp up to be done. So, we offer terrific programs for that. And so there is a cost associated with it, but we pay for a lot of it with the service learning project money we have in the teacher's contract and other professional development opportunities that Kim coordinates throughout the year and at the beginning of the year especially.
Do you have any data on the time from posting a job to filling the role?
Is that all? No, I don't have that. Sometimes we've had openings. I had an opening for a PowerSchool administrator, lasted a year before I hired somebody.
So
that's anecdotal. So
if it was possible to get kind of some average on that, as well as, again, industry standard, like area standard or area average. Because again, in terms of metrics, HR metrics, looking to the private sector, that's one of the key metrics of whether your HR program is succeeding or failing, is how long does it take from when you post a job until you can get somebody into the role. So if that number is significantly longer, or if it's trending in the wrong direction, then that would be a good indicator for the argument that you're making.
Yeah, may I just say that we have no problem in terms of the immediacy of posting jobs. We have an HR director who I, quite honestly, is the best I've ever worked with in school environment. What we're finding, Brian, like most other systems, is certain jobs are much easier to fill and can be filled more readily. For example, there are more people with elementary degrees, elementary education degrees, compared to higher level mathematics, biology, chemistry, foreign languages, where the supply is shorter and diminished, certainly. There's where the competitiveness of the salary structure comes into play, because it's a supply and demand phenomenon like many other things in life, and if we can't be competitive, we lose out on those hard to find, highly specialized content areas.
Any other questions? Lori?
I just wanted to kind of give a big picture look. I think Brian's question is very fair on the data for Merrimack. But big picture, this article was just published today. I'm just going to kind of dive into the middle of it, and I can send it to you, Brian, if you'd like. Teachers are starting to leave classrooms. At the end of 2020, beginning of 2021, due to federal data, I'm summarizing the first sentence because it's long. Bottom line, there were 550,000 private sector education quits between January and November 2021. There were more than 800,000 resignations handed in during the same period by people in state and local education. Quits in the educational services sector rose 148% in that time frame, while quits in states and local education rose 40% according to federal data. By comparison, quits in the retail trade rose 27%. The share of teachers who left the teaching career for a new career increased by 62% last year. So we're not just losing them to other districts, we're losing them out of education.
Can you
All right.
reference what that article is?
Yes, that is from today. Teachers are quitting and companies are hot to hire them, Fox Business. Under education, the author's Catherine Dill, Wall Street Journal.
I'm not questioning that the teachers deserve the pay raise. I'm
Oh,
just
no,
wanting
no.
to see the data for it.
And I was just
because-
giving you the national data
Yep.
for what's happening in the big picture.
Yeah.
Because it'll probably give us a good handle on, is it happening locally as well?
Absolutely.
So I agree with
I'm
your
just
question.
curious to hear if there's data to say that Merrimack has a problem as compared to our neighboring districts, because that would make a very strong case for what the administration is presenting.
Carol?
I'm all set.
Naomi?
One other thing to put out there to round out the picture is, from my perspective, the need to get ahead of another curve that many people may not be aware of, and that is that incredibly fewer individuals are entering teacher preparation programs. That's what I do for my day job, and we're seeing decreases across the state, across the region. And so the idea that we'll have the same number of new teachers coming out, ready to be hired, is not something that can be relied upon in coming years. That's not a metric that we can get specifically for Merrimack, but it's certainly available for the region and would help with that as well, I think.
Matt, shall we move on?
Yep, that'd be excellent. The next article we have is to raise and appropriate the sum of $1,600,500 to replace a section of the roof at Thornton's Ferry Elementary School. I put at your place a letter that is from our roofing consultant. As we know, I've said it 1,000 times, Tom Tussaud walks through all the roofs. There's 11 acres of them, twice a year, 3 times a year. We have a consultant that walks with Tom to evaluate where we're at, because sometimes what we have on the capital improvement plan, we may have had a couple years ago Reed's Ferry being first and this being second, or J Muse being first and this being third, but it changes year to year based upon, failures that do happen in the roofing system. So when we went through this year, and we haven't done a roof in a number of years, we've kind of done a deferred maintenance on this to, again, to be mindful of the tax impact going to the voters. That was the strategy. This year, I do not think we have an option. If you read this letter, it states that there are, in that roof, areas of saturation of the insulation. This is Tom is much more eloquent on roofing because it's like his life. He's the roof czar, right? And so, we have a built-up roof, layer of insulation, a membrane. You've got the corrugated roof deck. You've got a membrane. You've got a layer of insulation. You've got another, like a hot tar mopping, and then you've got another membrane, then you've got another one, and then pea stone, gravel, everything like that, and it's all good, and it's a 40-year warranty. The days of us way back in the day buying 10-year roofs, 15-year roofs are over. Every roof that we have put in, Tom and I, has been the 35 to 40-year warranty. So we're not going to be around to talk. I'm not going to be around to talk about the Thornton's Ferry roof at all. This is my last speech on the Thornton's Ferry roof. Yeah, I think so. I know so. Anyway, so it gives you a little pictorial. We're talking around, I don't know, 40,000 square feet. We're looking at, if those of you familiar with Thornton's Ferry, we're looking at whatever, I'm colorblind, so whatever this color is over here that's not this green color or whatever it is, though it's blue. Thank you, Bill, it's blue. So it looks kind of gray to me. So that's what we're talking about, is the sections that need to be done. And essentially what you're talking about, because this school was added on to in 97, and these additions that closed the H up, they were put on. So you can see the sections that we're talking about. Let's see, a section H, it was Suprema, it was done in 1994. The warranty ended in 2009. It's 14,000 square feet. It was by Therian. It was something that, the installer was Therian. So with a warranty that ended, almost, 10 years ago, 11 years ago, 12 years ago, we've been kind of living on borrowed time right now. And we have to fix this because there is some saturation of the insulation. We are monitoring that situation. If there's a leak, we will fix it. But it's a patch job, and it has to be totally ripped up, and it has to be replaced. And it'll be replaced with a roof. We'll go out to bid. We've already got the bid specifications all ready to go. We're going to do it before the warrant article is even presented to the deliberative session, because if you're not in the queue now, forget about it. It's not getting done during the summertime, because that's when you have to do a roof at a school district, because it just encompasses so much of the school that you just can't do it during any other period of time. And all school buildings are the same as far as when they want their roofs done. So we've been putting together the specifications. We'll be putting that out to bid. Hopefully by the end of February, we will get the bids back. I'm kind of hoping to see if I could get a good number before deliberative session and maybe give people some good news, but I'm not certain about that. The tough part about this is, you know, the delayed maintenance of our roofs, especially in this environment, in this economy, with the supply chain and the manufacturing being such that it is, our one gating item is the fiberglass insulation. You know, it's Corning Owens fiberglass. Their factory's not running full tilt. So we may have an issue with getting the insulation for this roof. That's why we want to get it on the docket and get contractors to bid on it as quickly as possible, with the proviso that, you know, the contract will be signed and instituted, you know, right after the vote. So we just want to make sure we can get this done, and we think it's very important that it does get done. If there's any questions, I'd be happy to take them.
Questions from the committee? Lee?
Matt, I understand there are different types of insulation. Are you specifically tied to the Owens Corning style?
No, the polyisocyanate, the 1 inch thick hard insulation. That's what goes on. And it's put in with screws with little buttons around them, the big washers, and they go right through the deck.
Yes.
So that's what we use. I'm not tied into the brand. I just use that because, I don't know, it was familiar to me. So it's not the brand.
Thank
no.
you.
Any other questions? Carol?
I have one, Chuck. Yeah, actually two questions. One is, and it's probably because I'm not there, so I can't see Matt's nice little diagram, but when this is done, will Thornton's Ferry as an entire building all have roofs that's going to last a long time, or are we just talking about this one section will now last for a long time?
Actually, when I look at the other sections of roof that we're not going to be doing, the warranty ends in the year 2057. So this would button up that building for quite a few years.
Okay, so that's good. That answers that part.
Okay.
And then my other comment, and this is more of a general comment on the subject of roofs in general, and I'm not trying to cast blame on Matt or on the current school board. I am saying over a long period of time, I think there's been a massive error in the sense that, yes, it's fine to try and put off a roof. You don't need to do it just because the warranty date is expiring, that you don't automatically replace a roof. But we've stretched them to the point now, and it's coming home to bite us, because now we've got roof after roof after roof for the next few years with no immediate end in sight. And I think we need to, in the future, once we get past this mess that we're in, have a better strategy of spacing out roofs so they don't all come due at the same time. And that ties into my frustration over the fact that we haven't been funding the capital reserve funds for both paving and roofing. And right now, I see no point in putting money into a roofing capital reserve because the money would just be taken right back out. But long term, we need a better plan.
Yeah, Carol, I definitely agree with you. If we keep up with the roof program that we have, I think over the next 6 years we'll be looking at doing a roof consistently every single year. However, there is there's a gap of around maybe 6 or 7 years where absolutely nothing is going to happen on the roof front. That would be the perfect time. Well, whenever is the perfect time, but that could be an opportunity to take those costs that we were spending on roofing and to build up a capital reserve fund. It could be done obviously earlier if it is the pleasure of the board, but when you're trying to level things out from a tax rate standpoint, that could be a perfect opportunity to take advantage of such. It's kind of like in 24, 25, that's when the last bond payment for the, will be debt-free for the middle school. Last payment's 23, 24, that'll save us around $800,000. You know, you could take that money that was in the operating budget, it's gonna dip the tax rate down, and then reinvest it in a capital reserve fund. So that's another option, but that's for, you know, another budget for another time. It's long-range planning.
Right. Yeah, my concern is I think what has happened over the prior few years is the school board was very well intentioned in trying to keep the tax rate as low as possible. But in the process of doing that, they lost sight of the long-term impact, and now this is potentially going to be a problem for the next few years. And at this point, I don't have a solution to the problem, but I sure hope that going forward, once we get out of this bind, that we keep ourselves from getting back in it again.
Well, it is indeed a hard balancing act. I do not envy the position of the school board people that have served us well for not much of anything as far as payment goes. And I hope the community appreciates the sacrifices that they have made over the years, all of them that I have worked with over my 22 years here have been outstanding, well-intentioned individuals that, much as yourself, you know, volunteering on the budget committee, you're not getting paid for this. This is volunteer work. You're part of the community. You're here to give us input. So I admire that too, and you're all well-intentioned. You know, sometimes you have some very difficult choices to make based upon the tone of the community. Past few years, the tone hasn't been that great, you know, so we tried to kind of be prudent. Now prudence is catching up with us. So, you know, it's just something that we'll get out. I mean, it's all cyclical, and if, you know, you stick with it long enough, you know, you'll be back to where you should be. You know, I'm confident in that. I'm confident in the support of this community, as they've always supported our school system 100% when push comes to shove.
Thank you, Matt. Next article?
This is Article 7 that I've been talking about for a good 10 years now. So if Jody Valancourt is watching via YouTube or something like that, she's going to be watching me right now, because we had a little conversation about this years ago. There's a lot of districts, Bedford, Amherst, Litchfield, Hudson, whatever, who have this in there. It was voted in years ago. Shall the district vote to authorize the school board indefinitely until specific rescission of such authority to retain year-end unassigned general funds in any fiscal year in an amount not to exceed 5% of the current fiscal year's net assessment, according with RSA 194:B-2. Let me explain what the year's current net assessment is. That is the amount of money when you take our gross budget, let's say it's $82 million or $83 million, and then you take away our revenues, our catastrophic aid, our Medicaid, our food service revenue, everything like that, and then you take away our state aid, which is roughly $9 to $10 million, and then you take away the state portion of the income tax, then it comes down to what's left to raise on the local level. And that number for this past year was $53 million. And so, if this were to pass, the board could look at that $53 million and choose to retain up to 5% of that, which would be around a little bit over $2 million, 2-point-something million dollars. 2 point what? 2.6. 2.6. He went to Babson, I went to Bentley. He got the better education. I was out having fun. So that's the difference, 2.6. So anyway, so the board could do that. And it could be used for tax rate stabilization. It could be used for emergency purposes. It could be, withheld for the tax rate stabilization, because this past year, we gave back $8.1 million to reduce the school portion of the tax rate. If we had had this in place, it probably would have been prudent to hold some back to avoid the dip and the spike. And I know Bill's going to talk about the sawtooth effect pretty soon, because I can feel that coming off of him right now. He is going to. And so when you have that ability to try and manage the impact to the taxpayers, and you have this as a vehicle to allow that to happen as a mechanism, it's really important, because you got to remember, I worked 8 years on the town side, and when I had a surplus, I could go to DRA and say, I want to retain X amount of surplus because we came in high. If I dump all this surplus to reduce taxes, it's going to cause a dip, and next year I'm not going to have that surplus, and it's going to cause a spike. So let's not mess around with everybody's escrow accounts and their mortgages, which drives people crazy, and let's just retain a little bit more. So this would give us the same ability as the town. And the town, this past tax rate season, they returned $1.6 million on top of our $8.1 million. So that's a lot of money that went back from surplus to reduce the tax rate. So this is something that I think is important for consistency purposes and to try to level out the burden. We can't take this money and stuff it in a capital reserve account for a rainy day unless we have a warrant article to do so. So every single year, the board would have to say, okay, what's the year-end surplus? It's X. What's the 2.5% of the net assessed valuation? Okay, that's $2.6 million. Do you want to retain that, or do you want to just let it all go back? So this is all done in a public session with a public hearing, everything like that. There's no decisions being made in the back room. And if we need to expend it for some emergency purposes, we don't have to go, and this is a change in the law, which makes it a lot more useful for us. We don't have to get permission from the Department of Ed in order to expend it. We just have to have a public hearing to do that. And the board, even though it says the board is not the agents to expend, it doesn't need to say that, because when you look at the RSA, it says the board can expend the money after a public hearing if they choose to. And so this is something that I've been trying to get on the warrant article. If it passes, that's fine. I'd feel a lot better. That'll give us a management tool to even things out over the years. It's an important management tool. But if it's not for this year, perhaps in the future, but at least we put it out there this year. So that's all I have to say, and maybe Bill wants to talk about the sawtooth effect.
Well, I've experienced the sawtooth effect for many, many years. If you talk with people in education, particularly in public school education, one of the things they'll tell you is that of great importance is the ability to plan from one year to the next with consistent programming, consistent services. And an account like this provides us with the fiscal stability to be able to leverage our position from one year to the next from a financial perspective, but also from a program and service perspective. We have to be all about continuous improvement and meeting the needs of our students as they emerge from one year to the next, or whether it's a incremental 1 year period or 1 to 3 or 5 year outlook in terms of what are the emerging needs of our students. Oftentimes, if we don't have an account such as this, we start looking at other areas of the budget to say, okay, what do we have to cut now that's a crucial program or service to a student in order to be able to now afford this new emerging need? So this is an extraordinarily important strategic reserve that allows us to bring much more improvement along with stability to the system. And you know, please talk with the staff about the importance of planning programs and services from one year to the next instead of funding them in one period of time and then having to cut them to fund something else. That whipsaw effect is one of the most harmful effects in education, and this provides us certainly with the stability of being able to plan with consistency over. I like to look always at the horizon from a 1 to 3 year perspective.
Yeah, in addition, I mean, there have been points during the last, I don't know, 20 years where back in year 2000, I think we got $10 million worth of state adequacy funds. And then at some point in time, it dipped down to around 7.1. So we lost $3 million worth of revenue in 1 year. The budget remained flat, essentially, but the loss of revenue created a $3 million shortfall because of the state's adequacy formula at the time and the lack of them putting in the hold harmless or safeguard legislation, which said in any given year your adequacy wouldn't go down more than 5 or 10% or something like that. That wasn't then back there. So we dipped from 10 million to 7 in 1 year. So an account like this, where we could retain surplus, we could let some go at the end of the year to make up that difference. So it works both on an appropriation side and it works on a lack of revenue side. You know, because a lot of our revenues, like catastrophic aid, sometimes that'll come in at 90% of what they say we're going to get. Sometimes it's going to come in at 70%. You know, one year I was told by DRA, you know, if you're going to budget for this, budget it at like 25% of what you think you're going to get because of what's going on in Concord. Same thing with Medicare reimbursement, which is around another $300,000 to $400,000 in revenue. So it can really be a big help to help us manage the risk and manage the overall stability of the school district. So that's all.
If the committee will recall, we had a robust discussion about this several meetings ago. Are there any additional questions?
I'd just like one clarification.
Yes, Carol.
I think I understand this, and I'm in favor of it in general. I'm trying to figure out if I'm reading the statute correctly in that, let me just give you a hypothetical. Let's say 1 year we did the maximum of the 5%. And let's say that year we did not expend any of that money. So then I'm reading it that the next year, give or take a little fluctuation, we essentially wouldn't be able to add any more, that we're capped at not having any more than 5% set aside, no matter how many years down the road we go. Am I reading that correctly?
Yep, that's correct, Carol. At the end of the year, if you haven't done anything with it, it's going to go back into the general fund. It's going to go into unassigned fund balance, and then it's going to be subject to the board looking at it again, saying, do we want to do 5%? So 5% of the net assessed, I want to say assessed
Okay.
valuation. Yeah,
right,
it's the top. You can go.
I was just making sure that the way I was reading it was the correct interpretation. That's all I needed, and I am
Yeah.
in favor of it, so thank you.
Yeah, it's like if you're a town, DRA recommends like anywhere from 3 at the lowest, 3 is terrible, or around 15% of the valuation of the town. So that gives them the ability to hold upwards of maybe $12 million in reserve, which is on the high side. The town historically has held probably around $8 to $9 million in reserve lately. Years ago, they used to cut it real close, and it was around $2 million in reserve. But now they're in a good range, and they should be, the town of Merrimack, because, you know, they've got a good town manager with a really good finance background. He came up that way. And they have to worry about other issues. They have to worry about if they book a tax warrant and times are tough and people aren't paying their taxes, and you collect 70 cents on the dollar, you don't have any cash to make payroll or to pay the schools. And so, you know, when they retain that surplus, it gives them a cash benefit to be able to keep marching on without having to take a tax anticipation note out. And I don't know, I'm boring you to death with the town side thing, but it makes really good sense for them to do that, and they've been very, very good at managing that.
Other members? Ellen?
I just have a question so I make sure that I understand it correctly. So if we don't use the money, it goes back into the general fund, but is putting it into a capital reserve account considered using it? No. So that's like what we discussed in our meeting, and I just wanted to make sure I had, okay.
Yeah, we go back into the general fund, and then before we close the books, the board would hold another meeting to say, okay, now 5% of our net assessment is blank. Do you want to retain that? So every year they have to make the decision.
Okay. Thank you.
Anyone else? Next?
Next, we have the operating budget. I hope we've given you some good presentations on that and some good conversation. The total amount is $83,439,156. If not that, then there is a default budget, which is $83,174,461. You notice the default budget is less than what we are asking for as far as our operating budget, and if the operating budget fails, if it's left at 80, you know, if it fails, it's because it's up to you what to set that number at right now. Then the board has the opportunity to do another special meeting if they want to take up a revised operating budget, or they can go with the default budget. Last time we had a budget fail, the default budget was $50,000 lower than the requested budget. The warrant article failed, so for $50,000 we went with the default budget, and we lived through that period. So that's something that you guys are going to deliberate. You're going to have your public hearing, and then you're going to come up with your final recommendations, and you could have recommendations tonight. That's your purview.
And any final questions from the board? The committee, excuse me. All right, well, thank you very much.
Yeah. Thank you very much. We really appreciate you guys.
Well, just, Shane, thank you very much, and thank you to all of you. This is, I've learned quickly, it's a wonderful town and a wonderful school district, and I thoroughly enjoy working here with Matt, Kim, Melissa, and all of you. This is probably the most thorough budget review process that I've been through in many years, and so the town, I have to say, has been well served by your due diligence, so thank you.
All right, so we will begin our work session on the operating budget. Let's see.
question. Excuse me, Mr. Mueller?
Yes.
You're having your work session. Do you expect us to remain here during that, or will you rather do that, on your own?
Well,
Because sometimes we stay, sometimes we don't.
I understand, but if there are changes that you need to accommodate, I would certainly appreciate, Matt, if you could stay. If the others would like to stay, I certainly invite you to stay. But at this point, the Budget Committee will be making some decisions that need your recording and recognition.
Okay. Yep, just wanted to make sure.
Thank you. What's that? No, it's fine. So we're going to go through the budget book department by department. If you would like to make a change, please give the page number, the budget line, and the amount. And we will adjudicate it as we go. And we are beginning with district-wide.
Chuck,
Yes, Carol.
I want to bring up something. At this point, I don't want to make a motion to change anything. I would just like a discussion. And I don't know if it belongs under district-wide or under maintenance. I want to discuss the issue of Brentwood. Tell me where you would like that discussion to take place.
Well, Carol, if you would just hold that in abeyance for a few minutes.
All right?
Because we are starting with district-wide, I think that's an appropriate subject. And I was just calling for reflections from the committee, and I would like to have their voice first, but I intend to address your concern.
All right, thank you.
All right, thanks. Committee, district-wide. Are you going to recommend a motion for any alteration to the budget as presented to this point? Going once? Going twice? I would like to propose a motion that we create a new purpose in the budget and finance it to the degree of $10. The purpose of this would be for the raising of the red building, otherwise known as the Brentwood Building. Do I have a second?
I'll second it for discussion.
Thank you. It seems that everyone is in general agreement that the building should be gone. What this change in the budget would allow us to do is act at the soonest opportunity if circumstances changed. One of the explanations given to us for not dealing with it this year was that there needed to be some clarity about some other issues and the budget in general and other somewhat amorphous concerns. There is going to be an election. The school board will change. I expect the direction of the school district will change with that election, as it does with every election. And there may be a change of circumstances that would see a value in tearing down the building in this budget. And this has a purpose that would allow us specifically to do that, as opposed to waiting another year and instructions from a future school board that they need funding to be included in a future budget to accommodate the tearing down of that building. So what this does is it gives us a specific purpose that the school board can utilize with greater flexibility and greater response to circumstances as they see it change relative to that building, because everybody is in agreement that it should come down. It's just a question of when. So this motion would allow that to happen at the discretion of the school board sooner rather than perhaps budget years later. Brian?
So if we're going to do this, I'd like to propose that we end up with a neutral, no change in the budget by shifting all but $10 from the maintenance and utilities for that building to this budget line item, partially for the sake of not having an impact on the bottom line, partially for the sake of sending a clearer message about the intent of changing the budget item, still leaving the flexibility, but making clear the intent that this should be the priority should be to level the building.
Is there a second for Brian's proposed amendment?
Can somebody kind of briefly restate what he said? He was breaking up and I only got part of it.
So instead of adding $10 to the bottom line, to shift the money that is currently budgeted for maintenance and utilities for the Brentwood building onto the line item to demolish the Brentwood building, leaving only $10 for maintenance and utilities. And there's two reasons for...
I'd like to hear some input from Matt on that. I'm on the fence.
Carol, I'm afraid that wouldn't be appropriate at this time.
All right.
There's two reasons why I propose that. One is so that we don't change the bottom line amount. The other is to send a clearer message, a more deliberate message of the intent behind adding this budget line.
Is there any other discussion on the amendment? Shane?
So $10, does this just give us a vehicle to move money at some point if, I don't understand what $10 is going to do?
Well, the $10 is a financial commitment to a specific purpose.
Right.
So if the school board decided that they wanted to do something, there must be a purpose in the budget for them to take action on.
So they can move money if they need
They
to?
can, they have a bottom line
Gotcha.
ability to move money from anywhere in their budget to anything they want to do, more or less, unless it's contractually obligated or otherwise prevented by administrative rules and so forth. Naomi?
Could we have a restatement or clarification of the powers of this committee? I'm not sure we can do specific line-by-line edits.
This is our budget, and we have the ability and the authority to create a budget for the school district.
Okay. Is there a place where we could get a clear, I think that there are points where we can and can't, and I want to make sure we're within it. I'm not saying we're outside of it, I just want to make sure that there's clarity on that.
Chuck, can I chime in on that?
Before you do, Carol, there are actually communities in this town that the budget committee starts at 0 and builds their own budget, and theirs is the budget that gets presented.
Okay, thank you.
This is the power given to us under the municipal budget law.
Chuck, can I say something?
Certainly.
I'm of the opinion, and I can't prove this, but that the budget committee at the end of the day is recommending to the voters a bottom line budget. But yes, we adjust line by line in order to arrive at that bottom line budget. So we can't enforce the line by line part. The school board can move it between lines, and all we control is the bottom line. But the only way to arrive at that bottom line is by making adjustments to individual line items.
That's correct. And the school board cannot act on the operating budget without a specific purpose being included in the operating budget. And so we are giving them the tool they need to exercise their authority relative to the raising of the red building at their discretion.
Overall, I'm not sure whether I prefer the $10 option or the moving the utilities to this line. I've still got to think about that.
Well,
But overall, the concept,
at the moment, Carol, we have an amendment on the floor, and that's what we need to speak to.
all right, I'll hold my thoughts for a few minutes then.
Lee?
Brian, I just wanted to be clear on what your financial implication was. Are we leaving $10 in the line item for the utilities and removing all else to put in the other line item? Or was it?
Correct. So
Okay.
what I'm proposing
That's what I
is
thought.
that budget account 100-2620-40-8411-00 be reduced to an amount of $10, and that the $920 difference be put to the new line item, whatever that account may be.
What page are you on?
That is page 1 of maintenance. So I'm crossing budget sections, I know, but looking at the bottom line impact, that part of the intent is so that we don't actually change the bottom line.
Nope, I get it.
But again, the other part is that this line, we have $930 budgeted, and if we are wanting to give a tool as well as send a message, effectively reducing that down sends a clearer message, and it still leaves the school board with the flexibility.
Thank you, Brian. I don't think that was clear to everybody. I wanted to clarify that for you.
There are multiple lines that feed the utilities for that building. There's electricity, there's gas, there's oil, there's water, so there's many lines that are all feeding into Brentwood.
There's one budget line that is specifically maintenance, utility, water and sewer, Brentwood. It is the first account on page 1 of the maintenance budget.
Correct, that only covers water and sewer, but there are other accounts in there that you
Okay.
will find are gas for Brentwood, or oil for Brentwood, or electricity for Brentwood.
Page 11 for the gas.
Are there any other comments? Naomi?
Carol, would it be, are you trying to gather all the expenses related to Brentwood into one place, or are you concerned about doing that?
I think if we're going to take the approach that Brian is suggesting, then we would need to adjust each one of those lines down to $10, and the only one that we can't really do that with is the insurance on that building, because we have no way of determining how to break out the insurance on Brentwood versus the insurance on all school district property, so that one we can't really adjust. But all of the other utility lines, I think in order to accomplish what Brian is talking about, we'd have to adjust each one of those lines down to $10. And I don't have in front of me the exact dollar amount, but I believe it was somewhere in the ballpark of $6,500 when you combine those various utility lines.
Which,
I could look it up in my notes if I had a few minutes.
if I remember correctly, last time we discussed an estimate for demolishing the building, we're actually getting somewhat close to that number.
Are there any other comments or questions relative to the amendment?
So, Brian, would you, per Carol's suggestion, take some from the other categories as well?
Yes, so my proposal would be all maintenance and utility lines that can be reduced because of not having a contractual obligation behind them be reduced to $10. And actually would challenge, we may be able to reduce the insurance because if we're demolishing the building, we won't be paying for insurance on it for the full year. So I think we could probably cut the insurance in half as well if we really wanted to, but that might be a little bit aggressive.
Yeah, we don't know. It's a very small portion of our insurance cost for Brentwood, but we don't know what the dollar amount is on that part.
Are there, Naomi?
Are there restrictions on the ways that the district could reallocate that money to utilities if it needed to? Are we going to create a situation where they have to not pay utilities?
The school district can move money around within the budget as needed for any line item. That's not contractually obligated, legally set aside, with that qualification.
So, see, I support this very much, so I think it's a great statement. I want to make sure that it doesn't create inadvertent side effects. Lori, are there any other side effects that occur to you?
That would require more thought than I can just do right off the top of my head, but I don't think so.
And unless I fat fingered a button or I missed a line, we're looking at $6,568 to the new budget line.
Can somebody repeat that back to me? I could hardly hear it.
$6,568
Coming from where?
from all utility and maintenance lines for the Brentwood building, unless I missed a line or I had a typo as I was entering it.
So is the number you're proposing leaving $10 in each one of those lines? Is that what you're doing?
Exactly. So that is removing all but $10 from every line related to the Brentwood building, other than insurance, which is lumped together, and moving that money to the new account so that the net impact on the budget bottom line would be $0.
All right, now I understand what you're doing. Thank you.
Are there any other questions relative to the amendment? I would like to say that I don't doubt the sincerity of anybody on this committee about the worthiness of removing that building. I recognized that there was an opportunity to put a specific purpose in the budget so that the school board, in its wisdom, next week or next year, could act. We'd like to believe, of course, that they will, just as we trust them to act on all of the other line items in the budget that we hope to authorize. it was an uncomplicated way of doing a very good thing and an economic thing. I'm very concerned that, as well-meaning as the amendment is, that it has an opportunity to provide very unintended consequences that may complicate things unnecessarily. As we can see, it really already has. And I would ask not to support the amendment and return to the original proposition, which was simple, straightforward, effective, and trustworthy, that the school board will do the right thing when they can, at the most expedient opportunity that they have. Our bookkeeping is difficult enough. I suppose should the amendment pass, we're simply going to yet again task the administration with a tremendous amount of digging and figuring and hoping that they got it all right and that there isn't an unintended consequence that they see that somehow or another would wrap wire around everybody's neck. So I'm recommending, I'm asking to defeat the amendment, return to the original simple option that certainly sends a statement as well as an ability for the school board to act more expeditiously.
May I say something, Chuck?
Yes, you may.
I think I am in agreement with Chuck. My reasoning may be a little different. I partially agree with the keep it simple idea, but the second thing is also, depending on the timing of when they chose to do this, there may be some utility expenditures up until whatever date they choose to close down the building and demolish it. So you can't say definitively, how much utilities would be eliminated. So that's another factor. But I think the keep it simple thing is, at the end of the day, we've sent the message to them what we think. Hopefully there should be some clarity, if it isn't already, very soon from Steve Keach. My understanding is there's no proposal that envisions any other use for that land. So demolishing that building has no negative impact. And I think just Chuck's idea of putting the $10 in sends the message, and hopefully the school board will heed that message.
Are there any other questions? I call the question. Pat, will you please call the roll?
This is for the amendment. This is for the amendment, whether we're taking the money from those lines and putting it into this new line that you want to create. Mr. Mower,
No.
Mrs. Lang,
No.
Ms. Murphy,
Yes.
Mrs. Groff,
Yes.
Mrs. Savage,
No.
Ms. Schoenfeld,
No.
Mr. French,
No.
Mr. Stisser?
Yes.
Mrs. Wilson?
No.
Mrs. Peters?
No.
Mr. Coakley?
Yes.
Mr. Albuquerque?
No.
Eight no, 4 yes. The amendment fails.
The amendment fails for lack of a majority. We'll return to the original motion. Discussion. Carol?
Only, I'll just reiterate the fact that from everything I've heard coming forward from the master plan committee, or whatever you want to call it, and Steve Keach, there's no way that piece of land is going to be used for anything else. We've already increased the cost of demolition by roughly $50,000. We've also incurred another, give or take, $20,000 in utilities over the years, and just throwing money, good money after bad, makes no sense. So I think that this needs to be addressed at the soonest possible date.
Are there any, Lee?
I like the simplicity of your plan, Chuck. It doesn't dive too deep in any one pocket or the other. It just simply allows the line item to be in the budget, gives them the opportunity to use that money or move money around to support that. I'd also like to state that I've heard multiple comments from the school board about the regrading of the gravel once a hole was filled in as an excuse to not move forward with this plan. And I can only, it bothers me deeply, and it just screams short-sightedness to me to think that regrading a small area of gravel at a minimal cost would somehow preclude this investment of demolishing a building and suiting it for a much-needed alternate purpose of parking for the high school children. So it boggles my mind that that is a reason being given for not proceeding with the demolition of this building.
Are there any other questions or comments? Shane?
I'd just like to say I agree with Lee. I may not look like it, but I've been in construction for 15 years. It's my career. It's all I do. And dirt parking lot's a dirt parking lot. You drive a bunch of trucks over it, you get some ruts. It's still a dirt parking lot. It doesn't cost a whole lot to fill that in. So I can agree with that statement. I don't know all the other, can't speak to everything else, but that's 100% accurate. And I also reviewed the plan, and I'm on the planning and building committee as well. And everybody's discussed that there's nothing you can do there. So, except for a parking lot. That land is too close to the neighboring house to do anything crazy, so it's just kind of going to be a parking lot from what everybody's talked about.
You want to call the question? Pat, would you call the roll, please?
This is on the motion to create a line in the budget funded with $10. So we're adding $10 to the bottom line for Brentwood site demolition. Mrs. Peters?
No.
Mrs. Wilson?
Can you skip me for a second?
Okay.
Thank you.
Mr. Stisser?
Yes.
Dr. Schoenfeld?
Yes.
Mr. Albuquerque?
Yes.
Mr. Coakley,
Yes.
Mr. Mower,
Yes.
Mrs. Savage,
Yes.
Mr. French,
Yes.
Mrs. Lang,
Yes.
Ms. Murphy,
Yes.
Mrs. Groff,
Yes.
and Mrs. Wilson.
Thanks, I just needed time to do some math. Yes.
That's 11 in favor and 1 opposed.
The amendment to the budget stands approved by a majority.
What was the vote count, please?
11 to 1.
Thank you.
District-wide, do we have any other recommendations to the budget?
Hey Chuck, can I just ask something? Was that vote we just took, was that going in the maintenance budget or the district-wide?
I'm sorry, Mackenzie, I didn't quite catch that.
The vote that we just took, was that going in the maintenance budget or the district-wide?
It's
The
a district-wide budget.
Okay.
It's its own separate purpose for raising the Brentwood building. Seeing no other recommendations, we'll call the roll, please. I'm sorry, got ahead of myself. Can I have a motion to approve the district-wide?
Motion to approve, district-wide.
I'll
Second.
second
We
it.
don't really need to go down through that unless you're dying to do all that voting.
Well, I was just trying to cover all of the bases for everybody.
It's your call.
We may, somebody may at some point decide they want to stop for the evening, and we could stop at that point.
Gillian has to leave.
Jillian does have to leave. Jillian is excused. It was 9:15, was it? That clock isn't right, by the way, so.
What? It is 8:54 right now. 8:54. That clock is wrong.
That's not right.
It keeps getting slower and slower. That's the next motion?
We have no way of forecasting
Yeah,
that.
it's 8:54. That's up to you. I would just like to vote on the operating budget at this point, but if Chuck wants to go we need to go through the departments.
What's the pleasure of the committee? Going department by department, or shall we take the budget as it's proposed as a whole and make recommendations for alteration or not?
As a whole.
The consensus is recognized by the committee. We will take the budget in its entirety as we have reviewed it and as it has been proposed and changed. And I will ask for any alterations to the budget that is on anybody's mind. No alterations. Naomi.
This is not an alteration, but a question. Lori, if you remember and if you're willing to share, I didn't watch the meeting in question, so I don't know. I'd be interested in what the top cut list items were.
In the whole budget?
priorities, Jen.
Excuse me just a minute. Carol, did you get that?
No, I couldn't hear. I could hear her talking, but I couldn't make out the words.
I asked Lori Peters what the top cut items were, the things that might have been removed in order to make this budget possible.
In our presentations.
Oh, okay, yeah.
In our presentations with each department, we did not request any. We did have a discussion of a number of line items, just seeking alternative funding, looking for parallel paths, but we also did not vote to cut anything from the budget as presented.
Were there any items that were proposed, discussed, and then not included within the final one?
No.
Thank you.
Can I have a motion to accept the budget as reviewed and proposed and amended?
I'll second that motion.
Any discussion?
Is that a motion to put forth a particular number to the public hearing next week, with the understanding that after next week's public hearing, it'll be revisited? That's standard practice.
Can we have a number to attach to that motion, just so that it's financially clear?
That would be $83,439,167.
67 or 66?
66.
66.
It's 166 as amended.
That's what I thought.
Brian's trying to squeeze a dollar out for himself.
No, we're,
Oh, right, we're looking at this one.
okay.
Okay, does he have it?
Do we need the motion stated fully, or do you?
Go ahead.
I'm going to need you to give me the important pieces again, and then I can restate it.
Well, I'll just say, it's to move an operating budget of $83,439,166 to the public hearing next week.
So that's the motion as stated. Jillian, do you still want to be the person on that, or shall I?
Somebody else is seconding it. We're good.
Okay.
We got covered.
Who did? I have to know. Lee? Lee? All right.
All right.
It took my second, right out from
You
Can
do
I
it
just
next
ask a procedural question?
Certainly.
I'm trying to remember, and I don't know why I can't remember this, but if we bring forward this number to the next session, and then if something from the public hearing were to change our minds, we can still revise our recommended budget. Am I correct?
Yes.
That is correct.
All right. I just wanted to be sure I was clear on that.
I'm going to take the liberty, seeing as no one else is going to speak. I think we've done an exceptional job of looking at the budget, discussing the budget, debating the budget. We certainly have had a diverse number of viewpoints that have been brought to bear, giving us all food for thought and learning in the process. I think we have all come to the conclusion that this is a fair and supportive budget for our school district. Are there things that we would have liked to have seen in here? Absolutely. There are so many things that we could constructively apply to the education of our children that we are not now in possession of because of financial constraints. This budget by no means serves all of our purposes, but provides an appropriate transition to the next year and ongoing initiatives and new initiatives that we can build on next year and the year after and the year after that and so on. So while this doesn't answer all of our needs, it answers all of our necessities for us to make progress on the things that are important in the school district. And I think that we are all very grateful that we have administrators and employees who are only waiting to do the very best they can with the resources that we give them. And I stand in support of this proposed budget. Call the question.
Mrs. Lang?
Yes.
Mrs. Groff?
Yes.
Mr. Mower?
Yes.
Mrs. Peters?
Yes.
Mr. Albuquerque?
Yes.
Mr. Coakley?
Yes.
I'm ready.
Mrs. Wilson?
Come on, I had to do the numbers. It was all about like surplus and stuff in my head. Yes. Thank you.
Mr. Stisser?
Yes.
Mr. French?
Yes.
Ms. McKenzie?
Yes.
Dr. Schoenfeld?
Yes.
Mrs. Savage?
Yes.
It's unanimous, 12-0-0.
That confirms my faith in this committee that we have all unanimously supported this budget, and I thank you very much. And I thank the administration
Okay.
for
We've been sending this message for
participating with us.
at least a couple times now.
Mr. Chairman, may I just say thank you to you and the committee for your wonderful support of our students and our staff. And we will carry out our mission of representing them extraordinarily well.
Thank you very much.
We have 3 other articles we have to vote on for recommendations for next week.
Hang on, I go back.
Chuck, do we need
Do they get to leave?
these gentlemen any longer?
What's that?
Do we need these gentlemen any longer?
Oh, no.
And I said we should clap for you, Matt, because no one ever claps.
I don't know.
Yay, Matt.
Even though I called
Well-
him Mark.
Hopefully, the votes on the warrant articles will go along very quickly. So I don't know if Matt wants to stay for the recording of that or not, but
I'll email you.
Make a motion to recommend Article 3.
Yeah.
second. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Roll call.
Yeah, all those in favor by a roll call vote.
Oh. Quick recovery.
Mr. Albuquerque?
Yes.
Mr. Coakley?
Yes.
Mr. French?
Yes.
Mrs. Groff?
Yes.
Mrs. Lang?
Yes.
Mrs. Peters?
Yes.
Mrs. Wilson?
Yes.
Mr. Stisser?
Yes.
Dr. Schoenfeld,
Yes.
Mr. Mower,
Yes.
Mrs. Lang.
Yes.
That's recommended, 11-0-0.
Can we have a motion on?
I'm sorry, I didn't call, you're right, Ms. Murphy. I'm sorry, I was at Gillian Savage line, so.
Yes.
Ms. Murphy, thank you.
Our apologies, Mackenzie. Can I have a motion on Article 5?
Second the motion.
Okay, motion was by who, please? I didn't see.
I make a motion to approve Article 5.
Lee did.
Or
You did the second.
Doesn't matter.
My foot's tired of kicking them.
Yep, call.
Yeah, I know.
Call the roll, please.
Ms. Murphy,
Yes.
Mr. Mower, no, him. Mr. Mower,
Yes.
Dr. Schoenfeld,
Yes.
Mrs. Peters,
Yes.
Mr. Albuquerque,
Yes.
Mr. Coakley,
Yes.
Mrs. Lang,
Yes.
Mr. Stisser,
Yes.
Mr. French,
Yes.
Mrs. Groff,
Yes.
Mrs. Wilson,
Yes.
also affirmative, unanimous, 11-0-0.
Motion to recommend Article 6.
I'll second. Oh, I'm sorry, Shane.
We're just still gonna.
I'm just really passionate about this one because I'm so mad we lost that money last year.
Any discussion? Call the question.
Mrs. Wilson,
Yes.
Mrs. Peters,
Yes.
Dr. Schoenfeld,
Yes.
Mr. Stisser,
Yes.
Ms. Murphy,
Yes.
Mr. Mower,
Yes.
Mr. French,
Yes.
Mrs. Groff,
Yes.
Mr. Coakley,
Yes.
Mr. Albuquerque,
Yes.
Mrs. Lang,
Yes.
also unanimous. 11-0-0.
Motion to recommend our
We
Article 8.
we don't get to vote on the other one. There's no money
Oh, okay.
involved.
Article 8?
We did the budget.
I was ready for that. I was all
All right. Public participation. There's no one here from the public.
Chuck, is Matt still there?
Yes, he is.
I just want to make sure I'm interpreting correctly. Article 7 could not be in any way construed to be a money article, could it?
Article 7 is already adjudicated.
Yeah, I've run that one past DRA. It's a non-monetary, there's no appropriation attached to it. So it's a non-money
Okay.
warrant article.
All right, I just wanted to verify that. Thank you.
Any other member comments? All right, our next meeting is February 8th, where we will be looking at petitioned warrant articles, if any. The public hearing will be at 7:30, and we will make final recommendations. Filing period, if anybody is interested, is February 23rd to March 4th. 4 3-year seats and 1 1-year seat. Adler, Groff, French, Lang, and Stisser. So I hope that you will all consider re-upping. We've done such unanimous work here so far. Magnanimous, unanimous. Without animus. And the deliberative session is March 8th. Snow date is March 10th. And I will always remind you that after the deliberative session, we immediately hold a committee meeting to see if we want to change any of our recommendations, etc. Having said all that, I will call for one more motion.
Shane. Oh, good idea. You don't like to call? I do, but I don't like to be the one to call.
Carol, are you all set?
I am all set.
All right. Good night, Carol.
Second.
Good night.
First and second.
First and second, and did it pass?
All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
We stand adjourned.
An excellent way of handling it.
One issue coming up. I'm going to be in California on March 8th. I leave on